morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, out of Voice of Radio. So today we need to talk about, Stellar Crown. And I need to do my usual reminder here and tell you guys to stop buying Stellar Crown singles. You see, here's the deal. The pre-releases for Stellar Crown have started. They have begun. I went to one on Friday. I told you all about it. It was lovely. And a bunch of people have been to pre-releases. We've had our first weekend of pre-releases. But that's it. We've had our first weekend of pre-releases. That's all we've had at this stage. We are still a week and a half away from the actual release of the set. So where we find ourselves right now is in that awkward situation where some people have got hold of some of the cards. And some people are trying to sell the cards. And that means that the hype for the set, the hype for Stellar Crown is high. Of course it's high. But there's not actually much out there. There's not much supply. It's very much a case of some people have been to pre-releases, a few people have the cards. So we got low supply, but we've got high demand because people are worried about missing out. And yeah, that's how prices end up getting silly. Take Lacey, for instance. First couple of sales that we had for Lacey were both in excess of $100. These were the first two sales over on eBay. I looked it up for a friend because, they pulled one. I'm not jealous. And essentially, one sold for $105 and one sold for $120. Don't worry about shipping there because it's looking at shipping to the UK. So $105 and $120. That's what people were paying for the Special Illustration Rare Lacey initially. And I told you this before and I'll happily tell you again. That is a ridiculous amount of money for the Special Illustration Rare Lacey. Take Cassiopeia, for instance. That was, the big card from Shrouded Fable. And initially we saw sales of about $120. That's what people were paying early on for this card. Is it selling for that much now? No! Of course it's not. Don't be ridiculous. If we go and have a look at Cassiopeia right now over on eBay, and we go to some recent solds, what do we see? It's still way too high, let's be clear, but we're seeing sales more in the $70 range. And there are some that are a little bit higher, but we're seeing sales more in the $70 range, $70 to $80. Certainly a lot less than the $120. And it's not only been a few weeks since this came out. And for Cassiopeia, because it's been out for a little while now, we can play the whole TCG player game. And if we have a look on TCG Player, we see that it started off with people. There was one sold for $200. That was obviously ridiculous. And it's come down to about $70 now. Now, for what it's worth, Cassiopeia at $70 I still think is way too high. But it's obviously come down significantly. And then, like I say, it's been a few weeks with Cassiopeia. It's been a few weeks that it's been out. Shrouded Fable's not been out that long. And already we see the price just absolutely dropping. As it should, incidentally, because it's a Special Illustration Rare supporter. And I've given you this example a lot, but I'm going to give you this example again. Iono. Iono is the crown jewel of Special Illustration Rares when it comes to Pokemon. We've got phenomenal artwork, super popular character, and a card which is just an absolute staple in basically every deck. And right now, as I record over on TCG Player, this is a $70 card. And look, Cassiopeia ain't Iono, and Lacey is not there either. And look, I think the artwork on the Lacey is spectacular. No argument there. I think Lacey is brilliant in terms of artwork. And I think it's a pretty good card. As a side note, while we're talking pre-releases, phenomenal card in a pre-release, because you shove your hand into your deck and draw 4 cards. But if your opponent's got 3 or fewer prize cards remaining, you draw 8. Well, pre-releases, you're playing with 4 cards, so as soon as your opponent takes a single prize, you're getting a shuffle draw 8 for the game. So specifically in pre-releases, Lacey is absolutely busted. Just literally hold it in your hand until your opponent takes a single prize, and then you're absolutely golden. But this is not settling at a $120 card. It isn't settling at a $70 card, frankly. But it is most definitely not settling at a $120 card. It is just ridiculously too high. Another card, which is one of the big ones in the set, let's take Trapos as an example. Special illustration rare Trapos, it's a beautiful card. No argument there. But if we go and have a look at the early sales over on eBay, people are just paying way too much for this. After week 1 of pre-releases, people are paying like $200. And look, these are not best offer accepted, all right? These are just flat out sales where people paid what was asked, and we've got a 196, a 200, and a 197. Again, ignore the postage. That's postage to me in the UK, which, you know, it's not going to be that much if you're living in the US if it's a US listing. But people are like legit paying $200 for this card. This isn't like a one-off or one silly sale or anything like that. There are a bunch of sales of this for $200. Which is ridiculous. Even if you go forward a couple of days, people are paying $170. You know, the price is starting to come down. People are still paying $170. And I'm just like, have we not learned this yet? Also, as a side note, I tell you this every time, but let me tell you again. This is friendly advice on your old pal Wassy, nothing more. If you want to pay too much initially because you want to get it graded, you want it in your deck early or whatever, doesn't really matter what your reason is, frankly. If you're looking at this going, Wassy, I don't care, I want to buy them early and I know I'm paying too much, go for it. If you can afford to pay it and you're happy paying it, you go for it. This is friendly advice on your old pal Wassy. I'm saying if you wait, it's going to come down. If you don't want to wait, cool. Don't wait. There we go. But this Trapos, like, in what world are we paying $200 for this Trapos? And yeah, I know it's Trapos, and I know it's a pretty playable card, and I know it's a pretty popular card. You know what else is pretty playable and pretty popular? Charizard. Charizard is, like, legit one of the best decks in the game right now, and is going to remain so for a while. And the more expensive of the special illustration rares is the one from Paldean and Fates, and over the past kind of 6 months, well, let's call it like 8 months. Over the past like 8 months, it's dropped from $185-ish card on release to $116. And in the modern game, in the Scarlet and Violet block, $115 for any special illustration rare is huge. And firstly, the artwork here is phenomenal. Secondly, this is a special illustration rare, which means low pull rates. Thirdly, it's Charizard. And fourthly, it is an extremely playable card. And it's sitting there at $115. Weirdly, the more expensive Charizard is still the one from 151, significantly less playable, but people have basically decided that it is the better of the two in terms of artwork or whatever. And that's sitting there at about $130. And why are we paying $200 or $170 for Trapos? Like, if the better Charizard in terms of playability is like $115, and the better Charizard in terms of artwork is $130, why are we paying more than $130 for literally anything? The answer is we shouldn't be. Special illustration rare Pokemon really tap out with Charizard. Now, okay, fine. I will give you, and I'm not happy about this, but we need to acknowledge it, Greninja EX from Twilight Masquerade. I will contend, I will admit, that started as a $115 card and has risen up to $230. And I don't really know why. Greninja's popular, but not that popular. The artwork's good, but not that good. And the card is playable, but not that playable. Charizard should be the top of the market for all the reasons I've just explained. And for some reason I don't really understand, Greninja is above it. And it shouldn't be. In Japan, it's not that ridiculously expensive, and the general rule is, if it's proportionally as expensive in Japan, it makes sense. If not, it doesn't. This isn't, it doesn't. Maybe Terrapagos could pull a Greninja and become ridiculously expensive for no good reason. But, look, I'm just going to tell you honestly, I am not going to base my analysis here on it could randomly start jumping up in price for no good reason. Greninja did, and I'm telling you, it doesn't make sense. Any card could, and it won't necessarily make sense. The sensible predictions here are it should settle under Charizard. If you're telling me that Terrapagos settles at a $70 card, I could accept it. But $170? Nah, mate, that's absurd. And seriously, we cannot base our collecting decisions on this card could randomly start jumping up in price for no good reason. You never know. No. Now, one thing that does tend to happen a lot is that we have a random illustration rare that jumps up in price for no good reason. And this time around, let's face it, we got, like the Bulbasaur, for instance. Bulbasaur, the first, we've got one sale that I can see on eBay right now for $55, which I still think is too high. And again, it shouldn't be. It's no rarer than any other illustration rare, although it is Bulbasaur, so it is more sought after, I'll give you that. But the thing is, if we look at these random illustration rares that have jumped up in price, they generally don't get this high. Again, there is one exception, but we'll get there in a second. But if we have a look at these random illustration rares that jump up in price, in Shrouded Fable, it was Persian, for instance, which ended up as high as on release, we're looking at about $40. And since then, it's come down to $27, which is frankly a lot more reasonable. We could look at stuff like the Tyranitar from Paldea Evolved, which you can see took a random jump up in price for no particular reason. But even this random illustration rare that jumped up in price for no particular reason never got higher than about $30. There is a bit of a theme here. We're willing to go, okay, they should be about $30. We will accept that. They generally don't tend to get much higher. We could look at the Eevee, for instance. The illustration rare from Twilight Masquerade. Now, to be fair, that one it's been doing the same kind of thing, where it kind of starts off at a high level like $40, goes up as high as 60, and then back down to $45. So maybe with the Bulbasaur we can go, and the Squirtle here would fit as well. Maybe it ends up quite high, but as I've just shown you, even things like the Eevee here never really get higher than $50. So why would we want to pay what is likely to be the maximum it gets to now, where we could wait a bit, and if it doesn't come down, we just pay it, and if it does come down, we get it cheaper? There are, in the Scarlet and Violet era, random cards, like the illustration rare Magikarp, for instance, which is still like $100 card, and again, that makes no sense. It shouldn't. It should be expensive, don't get me wrong, but it shouldn't be that ridiculously high, where they do just jump up. Things like Magikarp, things like Greninja, you can't predict these. Some of them just randomly jump up. Generally speaking, this is the worst time to buy singles. The supply that is out there is very low because we've had one weekend of pre-releases, and the hype for the set is as high as it's going to get because we've just started pre-releases and it's the new shiny thing. But I'm telling you, the vast majority of these are going to come down significantly when the set actually comes out, when we get to the full release. And yes, there will occasionally be cards like Greninja that jump up for no particular reason, but as I've explained, we cannot base our collecting decisions on what if this card randomly jumps up for no reason. Some of them, like the Charizard from 151, they get as high as they should and it makes sense. Things like Iono get as high as they should and it makes sense. Things like that Greninja, no. And I'd love to see proof that anyone predicted that Greninja was going to settle higher than either of the Charizard, because it makes no sense that it did, and it's certainly nothing that I heard anyone predict. So there we go. Give it a couple of weeks. Buy your singles then. Job's a good one. For now, I want to hear from you guys. I want to know what your chase cards for Stellar Crown are. I want to know anything you want to tell me. So let me know in the comment section. Go nuts. Be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWasi. That's where we talk about Pokemon and a whole bunch of other card games. And please do consider checking out patreon.com/PTCGradio, where you can support the channel, get some bonus podcasts, join a Discord, and all kinds of fun things. And get shout-outs on the channel like the lovely Uriel Rojas, who's been a supporter of ours for a while now and is a very lovely person. So shout out to them for the support and the loveliness. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.